Good evening and warm welcome to Sri Zafar Sareshwala, a noted Islamic scholar, uh, Guru, former Chancellor of Maulana Azad National Urdu University, and Executive Council member of BCTC. Sir, we are honored and privileged to have you today on this very important occasion and for coming up for delivering a speaking talk amongst our research coordinators, web development coordinators, graphic coordinators, and so we are once again honored. So I would request and not take much of your time, and please uh, you can start with your talk, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Aditya. It is always a privilege and it is always very full of excitement to be at GCTC. I mean, I've been associated now, right, almost since the inception, attended various programs. In fact, I've also addressed students earlier. So it is always a pleasure. And thank you so much, GCTC, for giving me this opportunity. And interacting with the youth, students is always a pleasure. Uh, Now, coming straight to the topic, it's about radicalization, de radicalization, and counter radicalization. See, my view about this whole issue of radicalization, and then it leads to terrorism, terror. Now, it is not limit to any religion or a religious belief, and it starts from extreme views that my view is ultimate. I mean, and it's not about right wing or left wing. That this extremism is also in the so called secularist, and this extreme view is also on the so called religious class. So, anything where people have these extreme views, this leads to radicalization. And this radicalization ultimately leads to terror. Now, we need to create an atmosphere of discussion and debate. This is the real thing. You can discuss because any view, my view or your view, you have a different view, I have a different view. But the problem arises when people convert opposing views as kind of animosity. If I have a different view, then I am your enemy. No, we only have differing views. Views can differ, or a very old axiom which was taught to us earlier that we agree to disagree. I mean, your view and my view. So, it starts from these extreme views, and that gives birth to radicalization. Because radicalization of any order, left or right, it starts with this that my way or highway. I mean, what I say is ultimate. And it starts or it emanates from that view. And I said earlier, it has no religious divide. I mean, it is beyond that. Because we all in last so many years, we only knew about the Islamic terror. But before that, we also had Hindu terror. I mean, the Sri Lanka, in Sri Lanka, the LTT, that they had nothing. No, what we say is right, and we lost our prime minister because of that. That's suicide bombing. If you go behind, this whole terrorist attack started in Israel. When Israel wanted to, that formation of Israel, if you go in 1947-48, this whole, they were Jewish terrorists. And now very recently, we saw what happened in America, in United States of America, in the Capitol Hill. In fact, the president-elect Joe Biden, he said these are homegrown domestic terrorists. He used the word terrorist for them. Because anybody who terrorizes this view or that view, and this because, when there is no room for discussion, when there is no room for alternate views, this happens. So I think we should always have open discussion, open mind, any view we can have. Let's discuss, let's talk, let's debate. I think if we have this, then ultimately we can defeat all form of extremism. And if extreme views are defeated, then there is no room for terrorism. I'll tell you about the Islamic, because I can't understand how it emanated. The whole Islamic terror. And I have no bones about telling that those people, they believed in the faith of Islam, but they had perverted ideas. They had used the Quranic verses to their own, what they were emanating. I mean, they had an idea and they would take support from Quranic verses, pull out of context verses, hadith, and then there were some falsehoods also. Like, for example, against India, when these terror groups started in Pakistan, particularly, they used a hadith called Ghazwa-e Hind. Now, this Ghazwa-e Hind is nothing. I mean, it is not mentioned. And a lot of Islamic scholars, we researched in 6 Islamic books of hadith, and nowhere it was mentioned. One book which came, I think, 250 years after Prophet's death, it is called by Imam Nawawi, and in that book, one hadith is mentioned. And Islamic scholars have dealt this at that time. About 700, 800 years back, it was dealt that this is false hadith and it has no meaning. Because Ghazwa, I'll tell you why. Because Ghazwa-e-Hind is used by both the people these days. The right-wing group in our country and the people in the other side of the border. They use Ghazwa-e-Hind. Now, Ghazwa means any expedition in which the Prophet has participated. Now, you tell me, in Ghazwa-e-Hind happening now, where is Prophet? He is in his grave 1400 years back. So this hadith in its foundation was based on falsehood. Now in Islam, there is room for different views. Because if you know that in Islam, there are 4 schools of thoughts, fundamentally. The Hanafi school, which is very much prevalent in India and the subcontinent. There is Shafi, which are more found in Africa, in Egypt. Then there is Hanbali, which is more prevalent in Saudi Arabia, and Maliki, which is in Northern Africa. So there are 4 schools of thoughts. Now you will be surprised, even in prayer, namaz, we call salat, there are differing views of raising your hands and putting on in prayer. There are 4 different ways. And we always thought this is also right, this is also right, this is also right, this is also right. So, in Islam, this views about ablution, there were different views, absolutely different, like chalk and cheese. But it was always acceptable. And we lived with that. But suddenly what happened about 200 years back, there was a gentleman called, who was born in Saudi Arabia. He was called Abdullah ibn, we call that Salafi, or, which is that movement, which was started in Saudi Arabia by a gentleman called, I just forgot his name, Wahhabi. He was called Abdullah ibn Wahhab. He was a gentleman called Abdullah ibn Wahhab. He was born about 200 years back. And he came with this ideology. Now, this ideology was alien. I mean, when it came in last 50, 60, 70 years, when it came to India, our Islamic scholars were perturbed that what is this? A very extreme ideology, which was alien to Islam for almost 1200 years. And this this gentleman called Abdul Wahhab, and they and the ruling family, the present ruling family, they had a contract, or they signed a deal that you will run the government and we'll look after the religious affairs. And that's how this Wahhabism started exporting. when after petrodollars, when Saudi Arabia became a rich country in last 50, 60 years, they started exporting this particular brand of Islam, which is called Wahhabism, or you may call it the Salfism. And this gave birth to an ideology which was very extreme. And through that, Al Qaeda also started, the ISIS of the world started. But this was always opposed by mainstream Islamic scholars, particularly the subcontinent. But anyway, it came up, and now in last 4 or 5 years, even the Saudis have started a movement against that. That gave birth to the Osama bin Ladens of the world. So this extreme ideology came up, and slowly, I came into contact with this ideology maybe about 35 years back when I was a youth, when I went to several countries, and till then we did not know, a Muslim from India, that this kind of ideology is alive in one part of the world. So that was my first introduction. In those days, there was no Al Qaeda, there was no ISIS, there was even nothing about terrorism. But then they started building that narrative, and it emanated after the Afghanistan war. Because when Afghan war, the Russians took control of Afghanistan, and the Americans wanted to drive them out. So America actually propagated this ideology because they wanted foot soldiers. They wanted foot soldiers, and they started this whole hadith of 70 hur, you'll get 70, in Jannat and all that. It started. This was all alien to us. And they recruited people from across the world because they wanted foot soldiers for free. They developed madrasas also of particular ideology on the border between Pakistan and Afghanistan. And they started producing. There was mass factory of such people. And what happened when America got its result? They drove out the Russians from Afghanistan. They suddenly vanished, and that became a vacuum. And they left arms and Stinger missiles and jeeps and everything. And that's how it gave birth to the Al Qaedas of the world, the Osama bin Ladens of the world. But yes, it is our fault. We as Muslims should have identified this wrongdoing at that particular time. We should have confronted them at that particular time. But anyway, it is never too late. And now in last so many years, there has been a movement within the community, within the Muslim community, within the Islamic scholars, and they have taken cudgels to directly attack this whole false narrative and this whole idea of being extreme. So now, and I've been part of that. So we started, confronting them directly. And this de-radicalization process started about 20 years. Now it is happening. Now it is even happening in Saudi Arabia and the Middle East. So I think now at least the right track is happening. But we always need to be alert. Because then, in last 10, 15 years, lot of websites, cropped up. And, the youth, they got misguided. So now I've been telling, it is also duty of the parents that where their children get lot of information. Now that information could be of anything. It could be ultra right, ultra left, or about terrorism. So many things are happening. So we need to be very watchful of what our kids are watching, who's giving them knowledge. So many things are happening. So I think it is a full-time job, and that duty starts at home, and also the duty of the teachers. And I think people like us also need to come up time and again. That's why I always am ready to, share my thoughts. So this is all about, and I think I've said, and now maybe if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you, Zafar Saab. Now I would request, there have been a few questions. To start with, we have a question from Apurva Agarwal. So could you please, Apurva, kindly switch on your camera and please ask the questions. Thank you.
Hello, sir. Warm greeting. My question is that, sir, would you like to comment on how there is a difference in radicalization, maybe in a secular state and a non-secular state.
See, I said radicalization can also be about secularism. This my view. What I am saying is right. So it starts from that. So it's not about secular or non-secular or right wing or left wing. We have also seen this whole Maoist movement, it is left wing. But people there also have a view that nothing doing, this is it. So any view which we impose on people, it could be about secularism, it could be about right wing, it could be about religion. Always there should be a door of discussion, debate open. And everything should be in moderate terms. I'll tell you about Islam. Prophet has always talked about moderation. Islam has talked about moderation even in your worship. Islam doesn't say that you keep fast 365 days. No, only 30 days. You pray only 5 times a day. You only remember God only on particular. So even extreme or high dosage of religion is also not acceptable. I mean, you have something for God, some time for prayer, you have your wife, you have your children, you have your neighbors, so there should be measured. Everything should be in measured terms. And always there should be amount left for people's discussion. Nothing should be imposed on anybody, any view.
Thank you,
Yes,
sir.
right.
Any other point you want to ask, Apurva?
No, sir, not as such.
Thank you. So the next we have with Neha Ramesh, again a research coordinator with GCTC. Neha, over to you.
Thank you, sir. So today I would like to ask you about the relationship between socio-economic development and radicalization. Although this has been contested repeatedly, research shows a bell curve peaking around a middle-high income group engaging in radical activity. What is your opinion on the matter?
See, yes, I've seen that radicalization also happens in very highly educated also. I mean, doctors and engineers and, very highly educated also. But that is a very small portion. But real radicalization, I mean, the recruitment of such people happens in so many countries. The Kassabs of the world. I mean, this Ajmal Kassab, when he came, he was taught namaz by our jailer in Bombay Arthur Road jail. He did not even know how to pray namaz, and he came as a Islamic terrorist. So they recruit people from very poor background. That actually emanates. So socio-economic development is very important, but that alone will not help, because I've been talking. I run an initiative called Talim or Tarbiyat, where we say that Talim means education alone will not help. With education, you need Tarbiyat. Tarbiyat means self-development. Because as we say in, it is a Persian proverb, I'll translate in Hindi, कि 1 किलो अकल के लिए, 1 किलो इल्म के लिए 40 किलो अकल की जरूरत है. बोलते हैं ना, 1 किलो अकल, 1 किलो इल्म, नॉलेज के लिए 40 किलो अकल चाहिए. So knowledge is also dangerous. I mean, as we say a lot of times in our Gujarati, we say भण्या पण गण्या नहीं. Means पढ़ाई तो कर ली लेकिन नहीं आई. तो पढ़ाई अकेली नहीं है. Yes, you need education. Yes, absolutely. But it needs polishing. And that polishing also should be about character also. And that character building comes from home. That is, I call honesty and integrity. And that comes from home. वो घर से निकलेगा. That honesty and integrity cannot be taught in any college or any university. It has to be taught, and this is duty. That's why we always say कि बच्चे का पहला मदरसा in Islamic terminology. Madrasa means school. वो माँ की गोद है. Because, and I've seen what that child learns on the lap of the mother or in the environment of home that remains with him all his life. So yes, education is most important, but it needs transformation of honesty and integrity. Now that will come from home. In fact, I'll tell you, I was in UK, and my daughter was put in a hostel. It was a boarding school. A lot of things happen in boarding school. So when I went to the principal, you know what he said? Our job, Mr. Sareshwala, is to teach, to educate. Character building is your job. वो हमारा काम नहीं है. Character building, honesty, integrity has to be taught by you. And it doesn't come naturally. The parents will have to teach. I remember an instance, because I'm close to, Salim Saab, Salman Khan's father. Every morning I meet him, and every day he teaches something new to us. And he teaches कि माँ क्या सिखाती है. He always gives an example that he must be about 4 or 5 years old. Okay. He said, मैं 5 साल की उम्र थी, and his father was IGP in those days. In 1941-42, he was DIG of Indore state. So he said, we used to live in a compound, and santri होते थे, पुलिस वाले होते थे, how उस जमाने में, अंग्रेजों के जमाने में. He said, my mother was sick. She was kept in isolation. और एक खिलौने वाला आता था बेचने के लिए, खिलौना बेचने के लिए, और औरतें घर की आती थी. The ladies used to come, the children used to come. He said, I flipped one toy. Child, 5-6-year-old child, what he does, he saw that toy and he flipped that. When I went home, my mother said, how did you get it? I said, he flipped. My mother made sure he brought that santri. He said, जाओ, इसको ले जाओ और इसको जाके बोलो, वहां रखे और कहे कि मैं माफी मांगता हूं, मैंने चोरी की थी. So as a child, I was terrorized that this is chori. He said, when I grew up and I came to Mumbai, in those days, there were this phone, वो जो पता नहीं आजकल के बच्चों को तो नहीं मालूम, वो फोन होते थे, बूथ होते थे, जिसमें कॉइन डालते थे तो फोन चालू होता था. और हम लोगों ने भी ये किया, हम लोग कॉइन में वो होल करके रस्सी से बांध देते थे और वो कॉइन को डालते थे, चालू होता था, बंद होता था, वापस निकाल लेते थे. This youth used to do. It was cheating. Salim Saab said, when I came to Mumbai, this was people doing, but I used to dread कि नहीं, मैं ये नहीं कर सकता. वो माँ की गोद में जो मुझे मिला था कि झूठ तो मैं नहीं बोल सकता, ये गलत है. And he always says, Salim Saab always says one thing, कि दुनिया में 2 ही सच है, या हाँ या ना, बाकी सब हेरा फेरी है. So with education, honesty, integrity, character building, that has to come from home. Because without that, because Osama bin Laden was a graduate engineer. Then you have Dr. What's his name, who's in Afghanistan. He's a pediatrician. So ऐसा नहीं है. But with education, you also need that character building. So we have to work all round, because it comes from very lower background also and very higher background. It comes from anywhere. So we have to be very vigilant all the time. And I think honesty and integrity is the most important ingredient, because education without this will be empty. It can lead you to anywhere. So you don't, that it is only upper class or upper middle class or lower class. It can come from anywhere.
Thank you, Zafar Saab. Now we have Monia. Monia, please, over to you.
Good evening, sir. Sir, would you like to comment on the rise of Wahhabism in Kashmir and systematic suppression of the Sufi belief?
See, this Wahhabi, I couldn't see your face. Your camera was off, I think.
Monia?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you can. Your camera is off still. Yeah, now I can see. Anyway, see, Wahhabism was always antidote of Sufism. The whole Wahhabi movement was antidote. It could never, जिसको हम कहते थे आग और पानी है. But when, इससे I always say, when Kashmir की जब बात आती है, So I used to always comment that, look, we need to, that human approach is also very needed now there, because there's an open ground. So everybody will try to influence. The Wahhabism, I remember, when this glasnost happened in Russia, when Russia was broken, USSR, and all the Islamic, like, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, those 7, 8 Muslim republics, they became, independent of Russia. In those days, the Wahhabis started exporting their brand of Islam. Now I went to Kazakhstan, I think in about 20 years back, almost, yeah. At that time, I was wondering that these people don't know basic Islam, but they are Wahhabis. So I used to talk to these Wahhabis. I said, "Aadmi ko Musalman to banate nahi ho aap, pehle usko Wahhabi bana rahe ho." So and those people were poor fellows, they were without religion for almost 60, 70 years. So whoever brought, they thought, होता है ना, भाई हाथी है, एक अंधे आदमी को खड़ा कर दोगे उसके सामने, तो और बोलोगे भाई डिस्क्राइब करो, अब उसने सूंड देखी, किसी ने पैर देखा, तो अलग अलग, तो because whatever came to them, they thought this to be Islam. So in Kashmir also, unfortunately, in last 30 years or 32, 33 years, whenever this whole movement happened, there was a vacuum. The Kashmiris were totally closed by Muslims from India. And Aditya will support me on this. There was no connection. Earlier, before 87, there was a lot of interaction because, we, and from Gujarat and everywhere, we used to visit Kashmir on holiday, and so many things were happening. Kashmiris used to come and stay. So there was interaction. And those Kashmiris I know, they were all Sufis. They used to visit. Sufis means, visiting the graves and all that. The Sufi Islam, which is very, very soft. Every Kashmiri, Hazrat Bal, I think Aditya will support me on that. Hazrat Bal and all that. Actually, there was extreme form of Sufism in Kashmir, which was even unheard of even in Nizamuddin Aulia or even in Ajmer. But then what happened in last 30 years? What was exported? It was exported across the border. The Muslims of India had no access. But now it is being, the Muslims of India are going there. A lot of Islamic movements in India, Tabligh Jamaat, which are all antidotes of the Wahhabi movement, are now going, explaining to the people. So it is happening now. So yes, because there was a vacuum, and if there is vacuum, बोलते हैं कि दिमाग में अगर आपने सही बात नहीं भरी, इसलिए मैं बोलता हूं कि माँ बाप के लिए जरूरी है कि बच्चों को सही बात डालें, इसलिए कि अगर आप सही बात नहीं भरोगे तो वो बर्तन में कुछ तो आना ही है, तो वो बर्तन में कोई गलत चीज आ जाए उससे पहले आप सही चीज भर दो. इसलिए it is always important that we should not allow vacuum to happen. So I think now it is happening. A lot of Jamaats and a lot of Islamic scholars are going who are of very moderate view. This is happening now.
Thank you,
Thank you, sir. Sir, I have another question. You talked about the teachings in Madrasah, so I have very limited knowledge about it, but I would ask my question. Sir, do you think these teachings should be supervised? Because lot of people think that madrasas are not supervised and it becomes the breeding ground for some activities.
In fact, you'll be surprised, and you can check with that. Take last 10 years, the people who have gone to ISIS or who have joined Al-Qaeda in last 15, 20 years, okay? And I'm not talking of India alone. Take Pakistan, India and Bangladesh. Okay? In the 3 countries, the people who have gone there is not even 1% from madrasa. Mostly who have gone. And in fact, in India, on the floor of the parliament, about 2 years back, when Rajnath Singh was the home minister, he said less than 16 youths have joined ISIS from India. Now in India, there are 200 to 250 million Muslims. Out of that, only 16. And he said the best part, he said, and the best thing is that we have been informed about these youth going there by the parents. The parents came and informed us. In fact, even Al-Qaeda, even from Pakistan, Bangladesh, the youth who have joined mostly are not from madrasas because it's not possible. Coming to about madrasas, see, I'll tell you, madrasas are the best NGOs in the country. You'll be surprised. You go to any madrasa, and in all these madrasas, 80% of the students come from Bihar, Bengal, and Assam, the three poorest states of the country. Because there the parents think that at least if we send our children to madrasa, he will get 3 times food, he will get clothing, usko sar ek ढांकने की जगह मिल जाएगी. And the madrasa people also teach them some form of education. But madrasas don't at all teach, because you can go and yourself stay in, Darul Deoband is in very near to you. It is about 150 kilometers from Delhi, or any madrasa in Delhi. Madrasas have no connection. Well, some isolated incidents may happen. That happens everywhere. But madrasas are not at all breeding ground for any extreme ideology. Yes, I have been a votary that madrasas now need to change. They need to take modern, mathematics, English and science to their children, and they have almost started. In fact, we started one movement called Virtual Classroom in Madrasa, where we identified 7 madrasas. We started teaching them maths, English and science of 7th, 8th and 9th. And we have almost now, most of the madrasas have enrolled in National Open School. So their students prepare for SSC and 12th. And you'll be surprised that I was Chancellor of Maulana Azad National Urdu University, which is a central university. And we started this. This has never happened, neither in Pakistan, Bangladesh, or even in Saudi Arabia. We opened doors for madrasa students to come seamlessly and take degree in science, economics and engineering, which was never there. Of course, Government of India helped us in that. We set up a bridge course and we invited madrasa students. They can come here directly, go through the bridge course. We identified about 200 madrasas of the country. And you'll be surprised, we have first batch of Madrasa Maulana Hafiz. He is now an engineer. A Maulana economist. A Maulana doing pharmacy. So we have started this in India. There are almost 250 students taking that degree. And most of the madrasas, at least in Gujarat, lot of madrasas have taken this National Open University, where their students appear in 10th, 12th, and I was working that there should be a seamless transformation of these madrasa students to the university. And lot of university in the country, I am very happy to tell you, like Mumbai University, Gujarat University, several universities have given these madrasa degree equivalent to first year of BA and BCom. So I think those reforms are happening, renaissance is happening, and things are, it will take time, but at least people have started this movement now.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next, we have Diva. Diva Jain, please.
Hi, I just had a quick question. Do you think that the counter-radicalization measures taken by the Indian government focus too much on Muslims, or are they? Do you think it's targeting Muslims, or do you think it's a fair distribution between managing all different groups of religious groups and political groups?
See, I I always felt about the Islamic or the Islamists that de-radicalization should come from the Muslim community, from within the community. Government has a very limited role to play in that. I mean, at the most, government will enact some laws like TADA or a POTA or a UAPA. But we think that why even the situation leads to that. But yes, radicalization is happening within the Hindu community also. I mean, the lynchings which happened, what was that? Then even now, in the name of love jihad, it's happening. So radicalization, as I said, it happens everywhere. It is not related to one religious group, one religious class, or one ideology. It is happening in the left wing. Some leftists in the universities. They also have a very, I call that tunnel view of a particular thing. So wherever, when people stop discussing, stop debating, and when they start thinking that no, my faith or my belief or my way of doing thing is only perfect, you will see this kind of things, and it will be, and yes, this is the way it is happening within the Hindu community also. So it needs, even the Christian community, the supremacists in America, they are Christians, they are Catholics. The guy who killed so many people in New Zealand was a Catholic. Recently in France and even in Belgium. So in Sweden, the guy who killed. So it is not limited to a particular religious belief. But I would say that the role of government is very little in that. It has to come from within the community. And if the parents themselves start putting, the best practices of honesty, integrity, togetherness to the children, I think you will not even lead, or you would not even need to have a POTA or a UAPA or any other laws. So I think the role of government is very less. It is the role which has to be played by the community leaders, the religious scholars of the particular community, and teachers.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Diva. We have next question from Urmi. Urmi, over to you, please. Urmi, you are on mute. Kindly unmute your mic. Urmi, you are on mute. Kindly unmute, please. Okay, in the meantime, we can have Anvesha Ganguly, please.
Hello, good evening, sir. Very nice to have you here. Sir, my question to you is that what do you think is the role of atheism in this entire fiasco? Do you think that if the entire world, or even a small portion, turned atheist and there is no religious, nothing about religion anywhere taught or practiced, will that be a step towards de-radicalization? What is your opinion about it, sir?
See, I have nothing against atheists also. I mean, I always believe that each to its own.
Right, sir.
I mean, okay, it is between a person and the God.
Correct.
He may
sir.
not believe. So that's where, as somebody who has studied Islam, and I've been talking more to the Muslims. And every day I have this argument with a lot of people. And I said, come on. I mean, you are nobody to tell anything to anybody. Because I talk that fundamentally you are responsible for your own act. Because in Islam, the Islamic theology, we say that we have two angels sitting. We call them Munkar Nakir. They sit on your shoulders and they write every single act of yours. And we fundamentally, the Muslims, believe that on the day of judgment, every act of yours will be put there in front of you. So I always tell people that, come on, you are only answerable about yourself. You are not even answerable about your wife. You will not be answerable even about your children. So why are you bothered? X, Y, Z is having whatever belief or not belief. So I think the people who believe in religion, and I think the same theology or same ideology exists in all religions. In Islam, the maximum you can do is put your view across. That's all. Beyond that, even God, there is a verse in Quran where God admonishes the Prophet And he said, your job is only to put across the point. He was feeling very perturbed about one particular person that he could not, put the view across to him. He said, no, are you going to finish yourself? So even the Prophet was admonished. So who are we? At the most, you can only give your view to somebody. So that's called dawat in Islam, that you are only responsible to give your view. So when people start, thinking about themselves, about their deeds, I think everything will fall in place. Then nobody will have any problem of anybody's belief. Nobody will have any problem whether he's an atheist or he believes in God or whatever. So I think this needs to come, that I am only responsible about my deeds. And as I always tell the Muslims, that you need to have that sense of accountability, that anything which you are doing, because you don't need anybody to give a certificate whether you are doing it right or wrong. Because in Islamic the jurisprudence, the first verse which is written is called in Arabic Al-Miftahul Muftun, means fatwa. Fatwa is an opinion. The book of opinion, it says that you ask your heart, apne dil se fatwa lo. You don't need a Maulana to tell you कि ये सही है गलत है. So I asked one Islamic scholar कि ये कैसे हो सकता है कि अपने दिल से फतवा लो. इसने कहा दिल जो है आदमी का वो कभी गलत गवाही नहीं देता. आदमी जुबान से झूठ बोल सकता है, दिल को धोखा नहीं दे सकता. आदमी अपने आप को धोखा नहीं दे सकता. So I think when I start looking in myself, I will get the answer. So I am only responsible about my good or bad. So if that starts, I don't think we will have problem with atheists or with whatever belief people have.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Neha Ramesh again. Neha Ramesh.
Thank you, sir, for the opportunity. So my second question today is about your opinion on and your ideas to fight the crimes committed against Uyghur Muslims in China. It is a rather controversial question, but in the light of radicalization, it is important to point out the injustice that has been happening against the Islamic community in some regions, China being a prime example. Please.
Yeah. I know. I've been vocal on that in Twitter, and in fact, when the Pakistan Prime Minister was worried about India, I said your best friend, next door neighbor. In fact, it is very famous that when the Prime Minister was asked by a correspondent about happenings in China, he said, "Oh, really? I don't know. I have not heard about it." So the Prime Minister of Pakistan had not even heard what's happening in his immediate neighborhood in China. So yes, of course, we are concerned, but what to do? I mean, what can you do? In fact, Pakistan, which is thinking like the torch bearer of जैसे इस्लाम का अलमबरदारी लेके चल रहे हैं, as if they have the whole flag of Islam, when they are not doing anything. So many Arab countries, they are not doing anything. What we can do except showing our resentment on Twitter or on social media. But yes, it is happening, and there is no doubt about it. Only America has spoken about it, or maybe some European countries have spoken about it. And I'm quite astonished that none of the Islamic countries have spoken a word about what's happening in China. I mean, Mr. Mahathir Mohamad was worried about happening in India, the ex-Prime Minister of Malaysia. But when somebody pointed this about happening in China, बोले वो तो बंद हो जाएगा भाई इनका सब, इसलिए कि China is major investor. So this is happening. But yes, it is unfortunate. What's happening in China is horrendous. And although there is a blackout, but still certain videos and things which are coming, they are horrible to watch. I mean, I can imagine nothing of that sort has remotely happened in India. Never.
Sir, just a follow-up on that, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So there was a recent article that was put out by Reuters claiming that there are multiple SMEs or small special economic entities in China who are who are run or who employ the labor of I'd say discriminated and marginalized Uyghur Muslims. So do you not think that this is a ground for radicalization? Do you not think that these people are very well capable of calling upon the name of Islam and committing terror against their oppressors? And also the second part to that question would be, why, in your opinion, do organizations that claim to fight injustice against Muslims and members of the Islamic community not targeted China? I mean, there have been no terror attacks in China that any well-known organization has taken quote-unquote credit for. Why do you think that is?
Because China has become a powerhouse. Pakistan, take for example, it's worried about what's happening in India, जबकि यहाँ कुछ भी नहीं हो रहा. But what's happening in China, because they've got $35 billion of investment. They are developing right from Beijing to there's a rail networks. So many things are happening. So they are not even bothered. Likewise, so many other Islamic countries, because China has investments everywhere. So China has bought everybody with its wealth, with its technology, and nobody can do anything about it. And yes, when you suppress somebody, when there is suppression, such things happen. But they are so badly suppressed that there is no room for them to even forget about any terror attacks. But they can't even shout. I mean, they can't even, their voices are also not heard. So, but it is a very sad fact. Only, and as you said, that Reuters have come out with this story. But
yes,
no
sir.
Islamic news agency has come up with that.
Nothing even on Al Jazeera. There's not even an article on Al Jazeera about Uyghur Muslims.
Even Turkey has not said a word about what's happening there. But this is the sad fact. Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Well, just to update everyone, we have today Zafar Sareshwala, who is a noted Islamic scholar and executive council member of GCTC and former chancellor of Maulana Azad National Urdu University. It has been a great session going on, and I would request all the fellow coordinators to kindly switch on their cameras and keep posting their questions. In the meantime, I would request Sidra to kindly share her question. Thank you. Sidra, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. I'm assuming that I'm audible.
Yeah.
Good evening, sir. Sir, I have a question that do you think people who get persuaded by these groups lack actual learning of Quranic verses or knowledge? And if so, why is there no initiative around the globe to promote the actual Quran or Islamic learning?
So there is a movement going on, since last so many years. And particularly, both the ultra right wing and the Islamists, they both quote the same 6 or 7. There are 6 or 7 verses of Quran, and that is in a particular context. It is in Surah Tawbah, and those verses were revealed in a particular context when Muslims were at war. Now, I always give an example that there is a war going on between, suppose, India and Pakistan, and the army is commanded. Sorry, I think the army. Can you hear me? Yeah, the army is commanded. Yeah, the army is commanded a commander, and he has his battalion, and he gives particular order: rush, just go. I mean, it's about kill. Now that order is only confined to that particular battalion, and it is only for that moment. So these verses were revealed for a particular moment. After that, the conduct of Prophet when he entered Makkah was different. He forgave everybody. So forgiveness is fundamental. It was only, and so in that context, those ayats were abrogated. And that condition is nowhere in the world. So a lot of it, even a very renowned Pakistani scholar, Dr. Israr Ahmad, if you remember, who died, I think, about 10, 15 years back, he had dealt on this in those days, that people are misusing the Quranic verses. And as I earlier pointed out in my opening remarks about Ghazwa-e Hind. Now, Ghazwa-e Hind, there is no hadith like that. It is fabricated hadith. It is a false hadith. And this was discussed 700 years back. But unfortunately, people pick and choose. So it is very important that we have proper knowledge about religion also. That is important.
Thank you so much, sir. That answered my question.
Urmi, are you there? Please. Urmi, can you please join back? I guess there is a issue with your hardware. Can you please join back again? Thank you. In the meantime, Ragini, over to you, please.
Hello, sir. Good to be part of your session. Sir, I would just like to have your opinion that there are many people or many thinkers who just fall for this path because of discrimination or because of poor governance. So, how do they overcome from this? Because they have been part of many discriminations. So there are the mindset of the people changes, but how to overcome that change? Sir, I would like to have your opinion on this. So because you said education changes, but sir, with that, because the social psychology, people have major effect of that.
So that's why I said education alone will not help. With education, you need character building. And education you get from college, school, or the university. The job of the university and the college is not your character building. Character building, qualities of honesty and integrity, these are enshrined in the home. And they will come from the mother or the father or the family surrounding. So it is very important that while you impart education to your kids in the university, you should not forget about this, or we say moral science. I mean, I don't know whether they teach moral science now in schools or not, but when we were studying, there was a period called moral science. So moral sciencing is a very important part, but that cannot be taught in school. So I'll tell you why. If you have moral science, if you have character, if you have honesty and integrity, even in the worst case scenario, you will not fall for anything. भाई अगर हर आदमी को मुसीबत आ गई और वो समझे अब मुसीबत आई है तो मैं अब तलवार उठाऊं और मैंने किसी का घर लूट लूं, नहीं होता. So there that character will by unequivocally under any circumstances it is not allowed. मैं भूखा मर जाऊंगा लेकिन मैं किसी के घर चोरी नहीं कर सकता. मैं किसी की तरफ, किसी लड़की की तरफ आंख उठाकर नहीं देख सकता. See, this is rape or जो molestation comes very late. Islam में Quran says, Ya ayyuhal lazina amanu ghadde basar. Quran says, oh you believer, put your gaze down. अगर एक औरत आपके सामने आई जो आपकी उसमें से नहीं है, माँ, बहन और बेटी या बीवी, अपनी निगाह को नीची कर दो. Hello? So you understood. So we need to have, that's why I say that with education, character building, honesty, integrity, this is the job of the home. ये घर से शुरू होगा. इसलिए मैं हमेशा कहता हूं पहला मदरसा, पहली स्कूल माँ की गोद है, वहां से शुरू होता है. In fact, I'll tell you, in older times, yes, I remember one instance of Junaid Baghdadi, one of the very great saints about 1000 years back. उन्होंने एक किस्सा लिखा है कि I think I'll have to Aditya leave because मेरे इतने फोन आना शुरू हो गए. So I think this is my last, and it's very important. I want to tell how important it is mothering a child. You know, a child of a very honest family, when they went out to buy fruits, and the boy picked up from the cart a fruit without asking. The father was surprised. The father got surprised that how could my child lift something? So he asked the mother, had you done something similar while you were pregnant? And she started remembering, yes, I had drank milk of my neighbor without asking her. So he said, yes, that has affected the child. So people used to take care of their honesty, integrity of their children right from the childhood. So I think when this happens, you will not have any extreme view, you will not have radicalization, you will have people with proper character. I think that is my... Can I, Aditya, go now?
Sir, just 3 to 4 questions and then you can leave, sir. Just please, sir. Please, sir.
Because I'm all continuously...
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Last question, Aditya, last question.
Just 3 questions, sir. Please,
okay.
Sir.
Okay.
Aprajita, over to you. Quick questions.
Yeah, good evening, sir. Thank you for holding a little minutes more for us. Sir, like you have said that counter-radicalization, it starts from the home, like the teachings of our parents. And even you have mentioned a very important point that the Muslim communities themselves are very like responsible to help their own community, have the teachings and everything. So do you think that counter-radicalization will also help in counter Islamophobia? Because in the entire world, we can see the increasing in Islamophobia, it is like ranging very high. So what do you think? So it is a very vicious circle. We are caught in a loop that radicalization, like what is happening, is equal to Islamophobia. It's rising and rising, sir. So what is your take on that, sir? Thank you.
Sir has left the meeting.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
left.
Yeah, he's just joining back. Don't worry.
क्या यार सरकार तूने इतनी लंबा क्वेश्चन पूछ दिया.
But yes, sir. Sir is back. So, Aprajita, can you please update again the question? But very quick. Limit
Sir,
your
you are
question.
on mute, sir.
Limit your question.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I got your question. I'll answer. Within the Muslim community.
पहले हम सारे questions ले लेते हैं. Then
ठीक है.
you can answer.
Okay,
right?
ले लो.
Then we have Hari Gobind, please.
So my question to you is the fact that now that you have addressed how to counter radicalization from the very beginning, right? How would you say that you address people who have already been radicalized? How do you make sure that their mindset comes to a more moderate standpoint from the extreme that they have been conditioned to believe in?
Yeah, I'll reply. Third,
Neha, you have all a good number of questions, but now we can take Urmi's question. That is, there seems to be some okay. She wants to ask that the educational and the teaching responsibility regarding what children learn in schools from the policy perspective to prevent anti-social activities at the institutional level must be carried out. However, this leaves space for extreme infringement on the freedom of certain religious groups like Muslims in the countries like India. That is yet another form of radical narrative. What do you think about that? Neha, you wanted to comment, then just that's it.
Yes, sir. So thank you for the last opportunity. So my question was, I completely agree with sir on moral, education and the role that nature plays and nurture plays in the development of children. My question is about the pre-existing bias against women in the Islamic community, even among the proclaimed, non-extremist groups. I'm not saying that there isn't discrimination in other religions. It's a cultural phenomenon, but it is more steeper and more prevalent in the Islamic community. Does this have anything to do with a religious base, or is it purely another exploitation of women on a fundamental and patriarchal level? Thank you.
Now, I'll start with your answer and then I'll answer all of them. See, Islam has never distinguished between a woman and a man. Right from, parda, as you say, Islam has not said anything about parda. I mean, the hijab or covering yourself. Quran only talks of moderate dressing. Moderate. The word is shaistagi, means not revealing clothes. But that addresses both man as well as woman. So Islam, whenever it talks about man and the woman both. What you are seeing now within, yes, it is there within the Muslim community. It is nothing but male chauvinistic patriarchal mindset. It has nothing to do with Islam. It is that mindset. In fact, lot of things have come from the Hindu culture, like Pati Parmeshwar. Now, Pati Parmeshwar is not a concept of Islam. Islam में पति जो है वो बिल्कुल परमेश्वर नहीं है, वो इक्वल है. बल्कि on the contrary, it is the duty of the husband to feed the wife. In fact, even feeding the child, the breastfeeding is not the responsibility of the mother. Islam says it is the duty of the father to provide that. If the wife is doing, she is actually वो आप पर एहसान करती है. So Islam talks, in fact, right from marriage. In Islam, nikah is not a religious ceremony. It is a contract. And the girl has all the right to put n number of conditions at the time of marriage in the nikah. But unfortunately, this is there since 1400 years, and our patriarchal society is not allowing this now in 21st century. I've been fighting for a model nikah nama with the Islamic scholars for almost 25 years. I mean, I'm only 54 now, but you can imagine at the age of less than 30, I've been fighting. So in Islam, there is nothing where a woman is less than the man or she is inferior. It is a long discussion, but I'll just cut short here. This is nothing. And unfortunately, the women in Islam, they don't know much about their rights. Second, somebody asked me about, can you hear, Aditya?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
I'll go. About already somebody who's radicalized. Yes, better late than never. In fact, I visited in jails. I remember in Sabarmati jail, there were people who were sentenced there for bomb blast or terror activities. And we started going to them, explaining to them that, look, you had a wrong belief about Islam. You will not go to heaven, you'll straight go to hell. So we started converting. Yes, maybe 90% we were successful, 10% we left them. जो बोलते थे कि जफर भाई भी अब मुसलमान नहीं रहे. So we used to leave those people. But yes, even in between also, you can de-radicalize. In fact, lot of youth who have come back now after IC's finished, and they've come to a conclusion that the ideology which we were emanated on was wrong and it was false. So I think better late than never. You should never lose that heart. Maybe 10% would be there who are totally ingrained, but 90% you can bring them back. And we have done that. So in between also it can be done. And I think that sums up all the questions, Aditya.
Sir, we have the last but not the least with Farman Ali, who is from Pakistan, our research coordinator from Pakistan. He has a question. So Farman, over to you. Please be quick and yeah.
Sir, no, I was just Mrs. Zafar was talking about the equality of men and women. So I, with his words, I just remembered the ayah of Quran, Ar-Rajalu wal-Qawamu and Nisa, and I think the ayah number 34, and in Surah Nisa. So I find personally many controversial things in the book as well. So I would ask him for the remarks on this ayah. So when he's saying that there is equality between men and women in Islam, in Islam itself.
No.
I personally have found kind of this confusion, you can say. So I'm not clear about this. So I would like to know your views about this ayah especially.
See, I'll tell you, everything has to be in context. As I said earlier, that every single ayat of Quran is, that's why, reading out of context Quran will not lead to you to the right path, because it is very important, certain things in Quran. I'm addressing Farman Ali Sahab, that it is very important, as we said, 4 things are very important in the Quran. For every ayat, there is something called Shan-e-Nuzul. Why this verse was revealed? What were the conditions on which it was revealed? So that is very important. Second, there is also Rasikh or Mansukh about Quran. So many ayats of Quran have been abrogated by last activity of the Prophet. As I said about those verses of Surah Tawbah. Those verses were revealed at the time of, on the 10th year, I think at the time of Badr. But the conduct of Prophet on the 23rd year actually concedes that what it was revealed in Quran. So that is also very important. And then every ayat of Quran has to be read in conjunction with hadith and with the life of the Prophet. So if you lift a particular ayat, we will always have this problem. Of course, these are we don't have much time here, but Farman Ali, I can, because this was my subject all my life, and Quran has more. In fact, one very famous actress of India, I don't know, I'm not naming her, but about 15 years back, she wanted to know what Islam talks about women. And Aditya and Farman, you'll be surprised, after my talk with her for about 2 hours, she said, I never knew Islam is such a pro-women religion. So the rights and duties, if you measure both, then you'll come to conclusion. So I think you'll have to take everything in context. So, but I'll tell you, our Islamic scholars are hiding the rights of women which are enshrined in Sharia. That is my fight with the Islamic scholars in the country, and I always talk to them. अरे भाई, जो शरीयत ने हक दिए औरत को, वो तो दो, वो भी आप नहीं दे रहे हो.
That is the point. So, जो मैंने आपसे बात की ना, सॉरी मैं आपको कट कर रहा हूँ. तो हमारे पास जो पाकिस्तान में, तो वो जो आयत है, अब मैं वो आयत नहीं मुझे याद आ रही, आई थिंक आयत नंबर 34 है सूरत अन-निसा में. तो वहां पे जो कह रहे हैं कि अगर आपकी वो बात नहीं मान रही या आपके पास कोई डिस्प्यूट आ रहा है, तो आप उनका ऐसा जख्म
नहीं, बिल्कुल नहीं है. बल्कि मैं आपको बताऊं, इसलिए कि प्रॉफिट ने इस पर यह कहा,
तो हमारे पास जो जहाँ पे जो काउंसिल ऑफ इस्लामिक आइडियोलॉजी है, तो उन्होंने कहा कि जी इस आयत का मतलब उन्होंने क्रक्स इस तरह निकाला कि जी आप इतना मार सकते हैं कि बस सिर्फ हड्डी ना टूटे, बाकी आप सब कुछ कर सकते हैं.
मुझे मालूम आपके जो मौलाना, वो आपके एक मौलाना है,
तो मतलब ये मैं आपकी बात के साथ कनेक्ट कर रहा हूँ. मैं आपके साथ बात के साथ कनेक्ट कर रहा हूँ कि जो मिसअंडरस्टैंडिंग या जो गलत तरह की जो इंटरप्रिटेशन की जाती है, उससे भी काफी हमें नुकसान जो है हो रहा होता है, स्पेशली हमारे पास जिस तरह की जो मैंने आपको एग्जांपल दी.
इसलिए मैं मुसलमानों के लिए एक बात, और मैं मुसलमान की हैसियत से कह सकता हूँ कि हम तो एक ऐसी कौम है जो अपने मजहब में भी जाहिल है. सो मजहबी जहालत जो है ना, वो बहुत ही खतरनाक चीज है. और फरमान अली साहब, आप जिस मुल्क में है ना, वहां ज्यादा मजहबी जहालत ज्यादा नजर आती है. आई थिंक थैंक यू सो मच आदित्य. और फरमान साहब, इंशाल्लाह अगर मौका मिला तो फिर आपसे बात करेंगे.
Sir, thank you so much. It was a great pleasure to have you and have great insights on the radicalization, de-radicalization, and counter-radicalization. I do understand that the time is really very less on this kind of topic, and maybe we can have more sessions on this topic for sure in next week or month or so, depending upon your schedule.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you.